They are everywhere in our environment, in the air we breathe, the water we drink, the food we eat. They are in everyday products we use for personal care and cleaning. They are in our furniture, our children's toys, and the products we use in gardening and agriculture. And almost all of us have them inside our bodies.
Today, thanks to human ingenuity, over 100,000 new chemicals synthesized in laboratories fashion the world we live in. We've introduced these amazing molecules into our environment without really considering whether nature would be able to recognize them and break them down. In our short-sighted rush to progress, we never imagined that some of these molecules would one day work their way into living organisms.
These test tubes contain umbilical cord blood. We've analyzed thousands of them and found pollutants such as heavy metals, organochlorine pesticides, PCBs, and that means that the mother was exposed to these pollutants and transmitted them through her bloodstream to her unborn child.
Sodium laureth sulfate, PEG 150 distearate, polyquaternium 7, tetrasodium EDTA, sodium lauryl amphoacetate, methylparaben, butylparaben, phenoxyethanol, polypropylene terephthalate. This reads like a recipe for a chemical cocktail, but in fact, these are the ingredients for my baby's bath soap.
No thought was really given to the health effects, maybe even outside acute effects on workers. I mean, if something was killing someone in a factory, you might slow down the production of it. But once it was out into the environment, there were no laws, there were no regulations, there were no thresholds, and that is largely true today. I mean, one of our toughest talking points, both with reporters and with regular people, they just can't believe these chemicals aren't regulated, but they're not.
A lot of these chemicals are post-war creations, so they entered commerce in the aftermath of World War II, at a time when safety testing requirements just didn't really exist. So these chemicals have been in consumer products for decades, and a lot of them are hormone-disrupting chemicals. Once they're in our bodies, they mimic estrogen or testosterone, and they trigger all of the biological processes that hormones trigger.
We have found over 200 toxic chemicals in the umbilical cord blood of babies. So you're polluted before you're born. Some of those chemicals were banned 30 years ago, and they're still showing up in newborns today. So we have this incredibly disturbing legacy of pollutants that stick around for a long time. They're toxic. They get into our blood. And on top of that, we have a flood of new chemicals and uses of those chemicals in consumer products day in and day out that we're exposed to.
As the petrochemical era grew and grew, warning signs emerged that some of these chemicals could pose hazards. The data initially were trivial, anecdotal, but gradually a body of data started accumulating to the extent that we now know that the synthetic chemicals which have permeated our workplace, our consumer products, our air, our water, produce cancer and also birth defects and some other toxic effects. Furthermore, industry has known about this, at least most industries have known about this, and have attempted to trivialize these risks. We are now in the midst of a major cancer epidemic, and I have no doubt, and I have documented the basis for this, that industry is largely responsible for this overwhelming epidemic of cancer, in which 1 in every 2 men get cancer in their lifetimes, and 1 in every 3 women get cancer in their lifetimes.
Chemicals are part of our daily lives. They are everywhere. In our personal care products, cosmetics, toys, cars, furniture, food packages, IT equipment, electrical appliances, everywhere. Consumers strongly believe that chemicals that are on the market have been tested and are safe, but this is far from being true, and a huge majority of chemicals that are on the market have never undergone any risk assessment. Some of them may cause allergies or cancer or obesity or disrupt your hormonal system. Now this is a problem for all consumers, but this is especially a problem for elderly people, for young children, for babies and for pregnant women. And studies have shown that there are already hundreds of chemicals in the blood of newborn babies. We have particular concerns with endocrine disruptors. Those are chemicals that disrupt your hormonal system and can lead to problems of fertility, to cancers, early puberty and obesity. Now those substances can be really harmful and they can have long-term effects even at a low dose.
Our modern environment now includes over 80,000 synthetic chemicals, with around 1,000 new ones being created every year. More than 500 of these are known to cause cancer or to disrupt the hormones in the body. Of the substances that are strongly linked to breast cancer, many are chemically similar to estrogen. Estrogen is a natural hormone that promotes female characteristics, and our cells recognise it by its phenyl ring. However, many synthetic chemicals also hold these phenyl rings. This can cause them to have estrogen mimicking effects. These estrogen mimics can cause problems by taking the place of natural estrogen and turning effects on or off in the cells at the wrong times. Because of this hormone disrupting effect, the estrogen mimics are classed as endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. Importantly, these chemicals aren't only found in factories or behind laboratory doors, as they are all around us in our environment and everyday products. You can find EDCs in many toiletries, detergents, plastic containers, and many other sources.
Endocrine disruptors are chemicals of growing concern. Fetuses and children exposed to even minute amounts may develop a wide range of health conditions, from diminished intelligence to cancers later in life. Our endocrine glands produce hormones that regulate the basic processes of our body, like metabolism, growth, reproduction, and development. Endocrine disruptors disturb how these processes work. 980 endocrine disrupting chemicals have now been identified. Among the most ubiquitous are a class of compounds called phthalates, bisphenol A, and flame retardants, including PBDEs, chemicals so common that almost all of us have them inside our bodies. Phthalates are in many common products, including food packaging, building materials, and pharmaceuticals. They're in our cars, and even in new car smell. They're used in cosmetics to hold fragrance and help products to more effectively penetrate and moisturize the skin. Phthalates may also be feminizing boys. Scientists found that phthalates may be associated with a shorter anogenital distance, the distance between the genitals and anus, a subtle marker of feminization in boys. The American Chemistry Council, which represents chemical manufacturers, says phthalates are among the most thoroughly studied compounds in the world and have a history of safe use. But phthalates are banned from children's toys in more than 10 countries and the European Union. In the United States, 3 phthalates were permanently banned from children's toys and child care articles in 2008 because of their potential to leach from plastic that's chewed or sucked.
Bisphenol A is undoubtedly one of the most ubiquitous compounds in our lives. An additive in plastics and consumer products, BPA makes up polycarbonate, a material as clear as water, as strong as steel, and a part of almost every plastic product we touch, eat, and drink. While we do know that BPA is dangerous, we don't yet know how much it could possibly impact our society.
But BPA remains widely used in many consumer products, from electronics to medical equipment. And it's in the resin of can linings and in plastic bottles where it can leach into the food or liquid contents inside. The Food and Drug Administration, which has jurisdiction over food packaging, says BPA is safe at the low doses that occur in food. But many research and health organizations remain concerned about BPA's impact on human health at current levels of exposure.
With bisphenol A, we're talking about extremely small quantities of this chemical getting into the environment. Samples drawn from this stream had only 30 parts per trillion. VAMSAL is worried because studies show tiny amounts of bisphenol A can derail early cell development in mice. And if mice are vulnerable, might people be as well? Recently, VAMSAL tested clear plastic baby bottles to see if they release bisphenol A. He devised the simplest of experiments. Let distilled water sit in brand new bottles for 24 hours and then test it. Every one released bisphenol A. Curious, he then decided to see what happens when the same baby bottles are run through an ordinary dishwasher, which heats them to 140 degrees.
Some of these bottles, by the time we had washed them 10 times, were leaching 10 times more bisphenol A than they had before they had been washed.
The plastics industry vigorously disputes any danger to children from the chemical. They cite the continued blessing of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration.
When it comes to endocrine disruptors, one of the most toxic places is your home. Some people are more exposed to chemicals because of the job they do or where they live. Low-income and minority communities often live near points of pollution like chemical plants and waste dump sites, or in aged and substandard housing. And these communities share a disproportionate burden of disease.
Well, somehow we have industrial chemicals floating around in our bodies. You'd think one of those would be enough, but 232, it's kind of hard to say what's going on.
I'd struggled with fertility and repeated miscarriages. And as I searched for an answer to why I was having such a hard time carrying a baby to term, I discovered the connection between our environment, our toxic exposures, and our health, particularly our reproductive health.
What we don't know can really hurt us, and there's a lot that we don't know.
80% of the common chemicals in everyday use in this country, we know almost nothing about.
From our own studies, we've tested 200 people, we found 482 chemicals, and there are 15,000 chemicals out there in heavy use. How many are showing up in our blood? How many of them might pose a risk?
We have no idea what the long-term health implications of these results are. And I do not want my son or anyone's children to be our scientific experiment.
Well, with what I know today about the extensive misuse of chemistry on a global scale, I cannot conjure up good dreams for the future. I have only bad dreams. Yet I want the world to be cleaner and to be kinder to each child that is born. I often wonder what makes me keep digging. I'm gonna cry right now. But I also realize that in the process of dehumanizing mankind with man-made chemicals, we are also producing individuals who will never understand the need to protect what is natural, to protect our life support systems. Individuals who will never see the beauty and the mystery in the birth of a new baby or the bursting forth of foliage in a food crop in the springtime. Despite these dire thoughts, more and more, though, I see parents who are concerned about their health and the health of their children. And women especially are trying desperately to find out what is safe and what will not harm the babies they are carrying in their wombs and their children already there in their homes. There is also hope that deep within everyone, there is something bigger and stronger than we are aware of at this time that cannot be suppressed by man-made chemicals. Something that will prompt some very exceptional leadership to step forward with the courage to turn off corporate control of the government and the world and take back for society what it needs to thrive.